icebreaker. Let's see. What's the favorite place you've ever traveled to? Robbie. So who wants to start? Ready?
All right. Well,
You're
I
the only
haven't.
one unmuted, so that's fine.
Oh, am I muted? Oh, okay.
You're unmuted, yeah.
Okay. I haven't traveled there yet, but I'm going to eventually. That's my next destination, Palau. It's on the other side of the world. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and it's got the most awesome scuba diving ever. So I'm going there. Just haven't gotten there yet.
Cool.
Yeah.
Shanique or Jeanette, do you want to go next?
I don't have a favorite place. I go to Vegas once a year, so
I guess that counts.
except
Okay.
this year, but
Yeah, I think I'm trying to be hopeful.
Well, my cruise got canceled, so I've lost all
Oh,
hope.
really? Oh, that sucks. Jeanette?
Oh, I have way too many places that I could say
Yeah,
is
I
my
know.
favorite.
I'm trying to think about what I'm going to say.
I know. About a year and a half ago, my husband and I went to Australia and New Zealand, and that was a fabulous trip. We could have easily spent a couple more weeks there. Just so much to see and do, and the people were fabulous, and we want to go back. So, yeah.
That's what I've heard about that area. And I get New Zealand's probably the place to go. They don't have any coronavirus cases.
Well, at one point they had 23 cases in the country, so oh boy.
Roger?
So I guess my favorite place would have to be the Netherlands. My family immigrated from, and living in the hills of San Francisco, I'm so sick of hills. I just want a nice flat place. So you think that there's not a hill in the country, so it's nice, easy biking and all that. Also, I love Manhattan, so those are my two go-tos.
Cool. I guess for me, it's a tough choice, but I'm going to go with Namibia. My sister was in Peace Corps there in 2016. We went and visited her. It's quite a beautiful country. We went to this place. There was these red sand dunes, and there was this white dried up lake at the bottom. So it had like this salted bottom. So the contrast between the blue sky and the red sand and this white sort of bottom was really, really cool. And just the people were so friendly and just very desolate. It's one of the more, I think, sparsely populated countries in the world. So that was cool. All right. So we'll get started. I'm going to follow sort of the same format I've done before. So we'll just go through a little bit about the chapter director role, its importance, talk about some of the resources in the resource guide, and then we can sort of have a open discussion about any questions you have or anything that you're looking to get out of this session, any ideas you might have. And let me share my screen if I can figure out this laptop, because I don't have mine. Yes. All right, so this is, again, the resource guide. So I'm going to find chapter director. Okay. So obviously the chapter director is a critical position at One Brick. Obviously, it's a real critical position for each of our chapters, and it's sort of the person that sort of manages everything in each of our chapters. Critical position, as I said, you need to have someone who's engaged, someone who's on top of what goes on in the chapter, making sure that the chapter director basically makes sure that the local chapter runs effectively. I mean, I sort of preaching to the choir here. I think most of us on this call have been a chapter director, but it's extremely important position. Not looking at what's in the resource guide. So yeah, I mean the the role of a chapter director basically is obviously to manage what's going on in the local chapter, but also to participate nationally in our monthly calls via Google Hangout. They were the second Monday each month. I think it's the fourth now. So the fourth Monday or the third? We usually have an annual regional get together. Probably not going to happen this year. Annual retreat typically in the spring, and working with other chapter directors and exec team members on ad hoc national cross chapter committees. Obviously, on the local level, typically most chapters have a monthly executive team meeting that's run by the chapter director. I'm not at least I know in Boston that we've done a thank you. We've done quarterly touch base meetings between the chapter director and each team in each chapter. I found that that's been an effective tool to manage things, is not only to have a regular meeting with the chapter, but also meet regularly with each of your teams, maybe quarterly or monthly as needed, just to make sure that everyone's doing well. And if anyone needs help, making sure that everyone's on top of what they need to do. If they need help, we can give them help. If there's support they need, we get them support. And then each chapter does things a little bit differently in terms of an all hands meeting. Boston, we did it biannually, but I know other chapters do it differently. But an all hands meeting is typically a meeting between the exec team and the EM team. Sort of everyone's there. And, one of the things we wanted to talk about was best practices for a successful WINBRIC chapter. The team approach is really an important aspect of making sure you have a successful WINBRIC chapter. One thing that I found personally helpful is, you never know when life comes up, especially because we're all volunteers. People get sick. People get new jobs, people move, they get married, things come up unexpectedly, and all of a sudden you may have someone who's been working on your team in a role for a long period of time, and all of a sudden they have to leave. And then if you don't have anyone waiting in the wings, it often falls on you, the chapter director, to cover for that until you can get someone new. So one good thing to do is always have like at least two people on each team on the exec team. So not only does that help with succession planning, but gives you more. It gives you someone to do, to be in line if you have a situation where life happens and someone has to step down. You have someone who can step up and fulfill that role. In-person exec team meetings and quarterly all hands meetings when possible. Obviously. Right now, in-person meetings is probably not the easiest thing that can happen. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but whenever we get through this, having in-person meetings is a good approach and good best practice that should be followed. It helps to create stronger ties between the team and also gives buy-in by encouraging everyone to be involved and play a role in decision making. Flexibility is really important in running a chapter. As I said, we're all volunteers. We don't want WINBRIC to be a burden on people. And by being flexible and offering to help, obviously, as I said, life happens. You want to be flexible with people. You don't want them to feel WINBRIC as a burden, and offer to support them as things happen. And that goes a long way in keeping a team mentality together, to have strong rapport in your team and making people feel involved. Balance volunteering and socializing. This has been successful in, I wrote the Boston chapter here, but we should say Boston chapter and other chapters. Yes, that was bad typing. I'm not used to this laptop. I will fix it later. Having a balanced mix between volunteering and social events helps to create a strong community, focus on giving back, and encourages people to get to know each other who are passionate about WINBRIC, volunteering in the community. So balancing our two sort of realms, volunteering and socializing together, makes for a good mix. Asking for input from volunteers, nonprofits, and other stakeholders, we've found to be an important best practice over the years. For example, you could conduct a survey of volunteers and nonprofits after events and socials to get their input on what we could do better and what could be done to improve volunteer experiences. I know Boston, we've done that for many years. I know some other chapters have done surveys. I know nationally we've done a survey, typically annually. And that's been very important to get input from volunteers about what they like, what they don't like, what they feel we should do more of, what events aren't working, what events are working. And it's always good also to get input from our nonprofit partners and our EMs about working with us, and helps to build better relationships. Balanced calendar. Ideally you want to have a spread out volunteer calendar to have a balance between weeknight and weekend events, different types of events. So you don't want to have, if possible, all food pantries or all, food serving events. It'd be, volunteers typically prefer if you have a schedule that it's more balanced. Not have sort of in terms of weeknight events, not have everything on Tuesdays. I know sometimes it can be difficult to plan things, but ideally you want to have more of a balanced calendar. We talked active social calendar. I think we talked about that at the last session, about how socials are an important part of a successful chapter. They can be a marketing tool to draw in new volunteers and encourage volunteers to join the team. Obviously when we're back in a normal world, it's always effective to hold socials in different locations. Now, try to have them on different days of the week. So you don't always have them on Mondays. Maybe have one on Monday, one on Wednesday the next month, and one on Friday the next month after, because not everyone can make the same day always because of their work schedules. Community partnerships to get out there. Community partnerships have been a real important piece in some of our One Brick chapters in terms of working with local businesses such as a brewery or restaurant to work collaboratively to help give you free space, to help get the word out there about One Brick, and then in return we can say that we're a partner with that business. That's been important. Actually use social media in the newsletter. This allows you to interact with, obviously, our community and get our name out there and tell our story. And last time we talked a little bit about newsletter tips, and in the resource guide we have a guide about a tips and best practices for newsletter and a website newsletter tool instruction guide. We also have a recorded presentation on newsletter best practices, so that's cool for that, giving you some input. We have some tips on social media as well in the resource guide. And one of the most important things in terms of successful chapter is making sure newcomers feel welcome. We want people to come back to our volunteer events and socials. By paying attention to newcomers, we demonstrate that we're inclusive and open community, and we obviously want people to keep coming back and get more involved. If people have that good first impression, they're going to come back. They don't have a good first impression and they don't feel welcome, they may not come back. And that's been a challenge, with that, we've dealt with in the Boston chapter over the years, is that as people have gotten closer together with each other and more become closer friends with each other, sometimes people have a tendency to gravitate to their friends, and then you want to try to avoid a situation where you have some new people come and everyone's sort of in their own little groups. So what we try to do is encourage people, if they're at a social, to try to talk to at least 2 or 3 new people they don't know, for example, and it helps foster that conversation and making people feel welcome. It appears that is the end of the resource guide. I thought we actually had more in the chapter director role. I think we'll have to add more. The chapter director, obviously, running those regular meetings, keeping on top of the teams is really important. Making sure that you have every sort of all the bases are covered in your chapter, that you've got the events team working on planning events, you've got your social team working on socials, you've got your social media team working on promoting of what we're doing. The other important thing about the chapter director role is to not make sure you get burnt out. This is one thing we've had experience, we've had some issues with chapters over the years, is that you can't do everything by yourself. And one person can't really run a chapter by themselves, and if they try to, they're going to burn out quickly. So that's why it's really important to have a full team to be able to run a successful chapter. And that's one thing I've been coaching the DC chapter on, is we're trying to find a new chapter director for them, and you need to have a chapter director, and you need to have a full team to make sure people don't get burnt out. And we've had that happen before. And if you're a chapter director, it's always good to be looking for a successor, someone who can be your associate, someone who can step in, someday when you won't be able to continue to run the chapter. That sort of succession planning is really important for keeping a chapter successful. And we've seen examples of when we don't succession plan, what's happened in certain chapters is that they sort of fade out a little bit. Sometimes they've come back, but we've had some chapters, unfortunately, that have gone down the wayside because people didn't succession plan. And, it's difficult to find. We're all volunteers. Finding someone who wants to take on that responsibility, it's kind of difficult at times. I don't know if I want to open up to anyone else to see what they want to discuss. Does anyone have any thoughts? I know we have several chapter directors on the call, or former chapter directors too.
Oh, Graham, I just want to say, and utilize your board buddy. It's a wealth of knowledge, experience, and you can bounce off ideas off of them.
Yeah, just a little, to build off on that. So the board buddy is sort of a concept we've developed in a national board to that each of us is assigned to different chapters to sort of be their board buddy. So intended to be sort of a resource for each of the chapters you're assigned to be there as a voice to listen, to provide advice and guidance, so to be there as their buddy to help. That approach, I think, we moved to that. Has it been almost a year since we started doing that? Yeah, wow. Yeah, so initially, the way we started with the new board structure is that we focused on different areas, and we found that there were some holes, or then certain chapters needed some more support. So then we switched to this sort of board buddy concept, which I think has been really effective in reaching out to chapters, at least the ones I've been involved with. I think it's been, so the idea is to give someone on the local side a resource that they can go to for help, for advice, for support, and just to someone who's sort of been in their shoes before. It's a good idea. It's a good point. The board buddy is an important piece of the chapter director role, and that definitely I want to make sure I add that in the resource guide as well. Does anyone have any questions? I'd hope to have a presentation, but I forgot that I was going to be away this week, so I just read off the guide, so hopefully I wasn't off base. Is there anything that anyone wanted to get out of the session today, or have any specific questions on? Or any advice that you might have as a chapter director to others who might be interested in that role? Remember, we are recording this, so our other people will be using this as a resource.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So this best practice I can share with you that we've had
Sure.
here, and that is when we have our all hands meetings, we'll get together with the restaurant and try to do a buyout on a Sunday through Wednesday, which are their lower peak times, their trough times.
Yeah.
And So they'll give us a discount. We'll do some cross promotion with them, and then we have a menu that's set ahead of time to save on website for their. Anyway, it's been a good deal for us. That's all.
That is a good idea. How often do you guys do all hands in San Francisco?
Generally twice a year.
Okay. And twice a year, and do you get pretty good attendance?
Yeah, so we have about 30 to 40 people coming down. We used to have bonfires and get-togethers in the parks for picnics and so forth, but that's really changed from chapter director to chapter director. And
Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, to get that kind of attendance. I know you're a larger chapter, but still, that's a pretty good meeting. I know that sometimes I've heard from other chapters they've struggled to get people to come to all hands meetings. So sounds like
we have it strategically located right next to the BART, which is the mass transit. So
okay.
In from the peninsula or from the East Bay. So we have that in mind. People don't need parking. And again, free food downtown San Francisco. People come.
That's a way to get people free food, central location.
Yeah.
And it's a way to show our appreciation for the work. Good suggestions we can give to other people.
So generally we have people get together about 6:30, and then from about 7 to 7:30 we'll do some member appreciation, some comments, some updates, and then we just have fun from there on after. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want it to be. I think that's a good idea to make it it's not just all a meeting. You want to make sure that obviously there's a fun activity or a social piece connected to it. Keep people engaged. We've tried that before, where we've done like an hour, maybe 30, 45 minutes, sort of a meeting, and then we go out and get dinner or something, or go out. I think one time we went and played bowling. That was actually pretty cool. Although I didn't do good because I don't know if you know, in New England we have a lot of people like that small ball bowling they call candlepin, or some places they call duck pin. So you actually get 3 rolls of a smaller ball. I think it's easier than the regular bowling balls, but this place was all the big balls, and a lot of us were not familiar with them, so we all were throwing them in the gutters. It wasn't very good. I don't know, Jeanette, Letty, if you guys have thoughts about best practices you've done in, when you were chapter director, Letty in DC, or Jeanette, you've obviously been involved in Seattle for a long time. Is there any sort of best practices that you've used that you might want to share with everyone else?
I think the only thing I can say best practices is try to get together often with your board.
Yeah.
I don't know if I guess some chapters don't get together as much as they should, because I think you get together, you have that continuation, and you build that, so people are a little bit more enthusiastic. There's more enthusiasm there. Sorry, I'm tired on my end. It's like 9 something.
Yep, I hear you.
That would be my only suggestion.
Cool. It's a very good suggestion too. Want to make sure you're meeting frequently. Roger, I saw you asked about survey examples. If you let me show you in the resource guide itself. Let me just show that again. We have some links to some templates that there's a volunteer survey post-event template based on what I think the Boston chapter has used.
Okay, I'll check it out. I can find it.
Yeah, and then there's a social survey template. We had used them as SurveyMonkey, but obviously you could put questions in your Google Forms. Obviously, I actually think Google Forms would be easier than SurveyMonkey, because SurveyMonkey has gotten not as easy to use as it used to be. But feel free to take a look at them. Obviously, they can be tweaked to whatever you'd like to use. Basically, the basic concept is asking for input about, what did you think about the volunteer event? Do you have any feedback that we can give to our nonprofit partners? How was the communication with the EM? Did they introduce themselves and make you feel welcome? Did you go to the post-event social? Do you have any? Would you like to see this type of event again? Do you have any recommendations? So it's basically just trying to get some input from people. And, we've gotten some really good input through surveys that have, we've gotten some really good constructive feedback that we've been able to give to our volunteer partners, our nonprofit partners. And we've also learned things about particular events that volunteers don't like as much. One thing that, you obviously might hear from the EM, but one thing we've learned from surveys is that, we learned that, we were doing some galas and stuff where, for example, where people weren't doing much. They were just sitting around doing nothing. And, getting that input through the surveys, allows you to go back and say, hey, thank you for having us at the event, but, next year we'd like to, have our volunteers be more engaged. Or we found out that all our volunteers were broken up into, individual groups. And it's better, obviously, to have the one brick group together if possible. So, that's something we could request if we did the event again. So it's really good to get that input. So if you want to use those templates, feel free.
And Roger, I would say make sure if you're using those surveys that you actually do something with the information that you receive. Yeah. Oftentimes we tend to send out surveys, people fill them out, we get them, we talk about them internally, and nothing happens. And as a volunteer, if you're giving your feedback that you didn't like a particular event or that you have a different way of doing things and no one does anything about it, they're unlikely to go back and give you any further feedback because you didn't do anything the first time. So that would be my only suggestion.
Yeah, makes sense.
Letty, that's a great suggestion. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're using that input. We want people to feel that they're giving input and it's falling on deaf ears. Shanique, do you have any questions or anything you want to talk about?
No, I deal with a different breed, so.
I know.
I would say this though, because like the builds team, I think is just amazing, but
it is.
The reason that the builds team works so well is because everyone plays to their strengths. So I would suggest to make sure that your team is active in a manner that plays to their strengths so that you don't have anybody feeling. That's how people become overwhelmed because they're doing something that's not a strength for them. And then we also are very team oriented. So even if someone takes on responsibility for something, if we see that they might need help, we do offer help. We're like, can you, let me know what you need help with. I can take that on and get that done for you. Mm-hmm. Whereas, we do work together as a core team, but everybody does play to their strengths. I think that's very, very important.
Excellent points. Thank you for sharing. So, yep.
Sorry, I was just going to add that, kind of building on what Shanique said, is that in Seattle, we obviously have been going through different iterations of our team as people come and people go. And I think our best practices sort of depend on what our current group of event managers and coordinators are, plus what's happening in our local neighborhoods, our local nonprofit partners, and then just kind of getting a feel for that and readjusting our priorities based on that. And so, several years ago, a lot of our EMs were very, very, very social. We were all like friends who hung out together. So we were having a lot more activity on our social calendar. Nowadays, like even pre-COVID, but more so now, is that everyone is pretty busy and pretty work focused, which is great because they're very dedicated people, but also too, they don't have a lot of time to do a lot of extra. And so we do try to adjust as it goes through. And while we have a lot of things on our list that are, it would be great if we can, we're also not going to force anyone to take on extra responsibilities or guilt them into, hey, you could be doing more behind the scenes. And we just try to go with the flow and go with not only people's strengths, but also their availability and their ability to, take on extra things and not go nuts.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a great point. It's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about, being flexible. Life happens, things happen that, people may not have the time to vote, and we don't want them to feel like this isn't someone's 9-to-5 job where they're getting paid to do it. We just want to make sure people are engaged, and we want to, if it feels burdensome to them, they're unlikely to, not contribute the way we want, as much as the way that we expect them to. We want to be obviously flexible and be respectful of what people can provide with the time they have. I mean, obviously they're giving us something out of their time, so we respect that. So that's a great point. Does anyone have anything else? Otherwise, maybe you can wrap up a little bit early. Maybe watch the convention.
So I have one thing. So, pre-COVID,
ask away.
We used to have team building exercises, which were just picnics. And again, people love free food and drink. And we found that if we go to the local
Did you say fitness?
Free food and drink.
Okay.
So picnics. We had picnics.
Oh, picnic. I thought you said fitness. Okay.
We just play frisbee and silly stuff like that.
Okay.
But what the shared practice I have is that almost all the microbreweries will give you free kegs of beer for nonprofit, and so you just have to go and get an alcohol permit, which is free, but that just lets the cops know that you're okay. And anyway, so it's been something that saved us a lot of budget.
That's a great idea. I'm not sure if that's allowed in my state to get a keg from donated, but that's pretty cool. So, obviously I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your night to join us. We are going to have one more session in 2 weeks on the 31st. And that's sort of more of a wrap-up session. We'll sort of recap kind of what we covered in the first 5, and we'll answer any sort of outstanding questions or areas that people want to cover. We again encourage you to use the resource guide as a resource. It's a living document. We'll continue to update it as things go. As things change, we'll add things, we'll delete things. I saw some stuff tonight that I need to update. So we encourage you to use it. And all these sessions are being recorded. Sorry, I had some issues with the email today, but I'll make sure that we get the link out for all the YouTube videos. And we encourage you to share that with other volunteers, EMs, ECs, and other members of your exec team, just so everyone has the information. And hope you guys have a great night. And now I can leave the basement. So.
Bye.
Thanks. Have a
All
good
right.
night.
All right, good night.
Night.